Hi, and welcome to Seat Meets Table, the podcast that brings people together. I am your host, Sam O'Hara-Childs, and in the seat today is punk legend Chris Willsher. Hi Chris, how you doing?
Sam, very good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Great to see you, great to have you here.
Been too long.
I wanted to begin by asking a big question. What does punk mean to you?
That's a really good one, actually. I think overall, I think punk means to me, it means, I suppose it means doing stuff yourself, doing what you want to do, but not waiting for other people to do it. It's all about kind of
Agency?
Yes, I think really. Yeah, very much so. That's something I ought to take more notice of. But yes, I think so. It's being brave.
Right.
I think that's the thing. It's being brave. It's being kind of not being. It's overcoming that kind of fear of overcoming a fear of ridicule, overcoming a fear of being considered different.
A fear of expression.
Yes,
yeah,
very much.
Of what
so.
expression could lead to in terms of ridicule and things like that.
Yeah. And I think more so now than probably ever. Which is kind of a bizarre thing to say, but I think in that respect it's probably as relevant as ever.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think it's harder in the current climate. It's harder for people to actually really express themselves without that kind of the fear of the mob, the fear of the norm, the fear of being singled out. You know.
Well, yeah. There's more maybe stringent pushback these days. Or,
yes.
The online mob is waiting there,
very much,
baying, raring to go.
Very much so.
If you step out of line in any kind of particular direction.
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind of getting at? Is that side of it?
Definitely, because I think now you've got what's sort of slightly changed is that where I think initially you had punk was often about going against sort of like establishments. It was going against things like big businesses.
It's kind of anarchy, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened now is it's still those things, but it's also kind of going even more so going against, because the herd sounds like a little bit of almost like a I'm superior them and us type thing, which I don't think it's that at all, but I think it's that kind of, it's become more of an Emperor's New Clothes thing than it ever has been. I think it's always been that, but I feel it's become. I'm now finding it. A handful of years ago, I didn't find it a problem. Because I think originality is a very key word in punk as well. I think that's with the bravery and the originality, doing things, thinking outside the box, and all this sort of stuff. And I find personally it's harder to do that now, even among one's peers who you even knew from a punk sort of field. Because a lot of people, I don't even think it's an age thing. Because it's not like about people who've, you get this old thing where people say, people become more conservative the older they get, and they become more, this, that, the other, right wing and everything like that. I don't think that's so. Well, no, maybe it is the case with some, but it's. I don't know. A handful of years ago, I became very aware that people that I'd known who'd been very against the system, against society, against the norm, and all this sort of stuff, suddenly seemed to be accepting it and becoming a part of it, and to a degree where they actually got angry with you if you weren't.
Yeah, I think COVID was a big litmus test of that. Wasn't it? It's hard to avoid that subject.
It very much was so.
And that's something that I definitely railed against, because I very much am about don't give me rules. And that's what a lot of the lockdowns were obviously about.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the essence of punk, me.
Absolutely.
And individualism and freedom is don't give me excessive rules. And a lot of people seem to embrace them who would have been previously quite left-wing.
That's exactly
anti-establishment.
That's exactly
and a lot of schisms arose. I think you saw that in your communities as well, which was difficult to lose friends.
Yeah.
But sorry, carry on.
No. You've summed that up. I mean, that was that was I think a very, very a key sort of like turning point for me.
Yeah.
Was that sort of particular era, because to put it simply, I remember thinking, where have all the anarchists gone? It was really weird.
Yeah.
Even people that I had held in extremely high esteems as big influences and all this sort of stuff, I sort of thought, you what? This is really weird.
Why so obedient?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, I think also a bit of disobedience comes in.
Definitely.
It's a bit of a so punk. A big aspect of it is sticking two fingers up to all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not just saying I'm anti this and I'm anti that, but also offering a bit of an alternative.
Yeah, I'm for something as well. I'm for this way.
Yeah. Yeah. So above all, I see it as more positive than negative.
Sure, I'd see it that way too. Yeah. It has to be. Otherwise, it kind of just can bleed into nihilism, which is not sexy or cool or attractive or productive. It's just fucking grim. It goes nowhere.
That's so true.
And I'm very against cynicism.
Yeah.
And I think punk should be about joy, fundamentally.
It should.
Insane euphoria.
Definitely. And I think another part of punk is, I think there is a certain degree, a great degree of almost madness involved in it. I think
definitely.
because a lot of the best people I've met over the years have been what a lot of people would consider quite insane, but they're usually the most kind-hearted people you could ever meet.
Yeah. Well, they're just thinking on a different, more lateral wavelength, aren't they? Doesn't mean they're not decent people, and often they can be because they're maybe perennial outsiders. They have to develop greater mechanisms of kindness. It's hard to articulate what I'm trying to say, but maybe if you're more of an outsider and you're more isolated, there's more of a drive to be kind to others because you understand what it means to be rejected.
Yes.
Kind of, that's not accurate.
Yeah. So there's a lot of thoughtfulness goes into it. There's a lot of, I found most people I've encountered in the various realms of punk under the massive umbrella of punk have been people they've been sympathetic, they've been empathetic, they're thoughtful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that sort of thing involved in it. And I think that's important because obviously if you want to make a kind of change, whether it be a change within a culture or a music thing or actually a more social change, I think you've got to put yourself in other people's shoes in order to do that.
Yeah.
And most people that have influenced me that I've experienced and encountered over the years have been very capable of that kind of giving things a bit of thought, and thinking, kind of like, well, how would I like it if this, that, and the other was happening?
Yeah,
so,
empathy, basically.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think so. So I think there's that bravery, there's that slight insanity, there's that being different, there's that the empathy, I think it is, it's
energy as well, surely as well, part of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Tied, or maybe all those things in a bow is energy. Excuse me.
Yes.
Energy in all kinds of different directions.
Yeah.
And again, that's where the positivity comes into it.
Definitely.
It's like, it's colour.
Yes.
It's vibrance. It's force, push. It's like the joy of life.
Yeah.
Kind of made manifest in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. No, I think you're right. No, totally right there. So,
that's what it is to me.
Yeah.
Seeing you on stage or me doing comedy, that's the, like the idea of rock and roll is the point of it is, kind of rebels without a cause. Just do it. Just rebel.
Yeah.
Just go.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I think so.
Just the joy of, the joy of action, the joy of movement. I don't know. Something in there.
Yeah. Yes. And it is the whole, and that in itself is great because there's nothing I like better than actually the feeling, because I know how grateful I am with the people that I've encountered over the years who have been a great influence for me one way and another. And there's no greater feeling and no greater joy or feeling of accomplishment if you then feel you might in turn have done the same thing for someone else in however a little way.
Sure.
But if you sort of think, that's, I may well have had some kind of influence on somebody or encouragement or whatever. And that to me, is nothing better than that. I love, I get far more excited about if it's going to gigs and things. I get far more excited about the thought of going to see a new band, a fresh band, an unknown band, than I would going to see like a band that I might have absolutely loved for years and years and years, but that to me isn't quite as exciting, because I sort of think, well, they've already affected and influenced me, but I want to see something new.
Well, you want new energy. Again, go back to that idea.
Yeah. And something a bit different.
Sure.
Something a bit different as well. You know, something that isn't just rattling off the same old thing.
Yeah, rewrite the paradigm, tear up the thing. That's part of the thing too, surely, is a big plug into youth.
Yeah.
In terms of what's inherent to punk.
Very much.
Is what are these crazy kids saying? What do they want? You know, they're the driving force of the next wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think with punk, I think that another thing that's always appealed to me about it has been the fact that over the years, what I almost felt at one time was almost unique, or certainly I wasn't so aware of it in other kind of fields really, and that's the fact that the generation or the generations, the age range, if you like, really, of people that were involved in it, whether they be in bands or the audience, or they were gig promoters or fanzine writers, whatever. But the age range was stretching. So it wasn't just like a group of old farts kind of going on a nostalgia trip and rehashing what they'd done 20, 30 years ago. There is that. But they're carrying on, and there's a new generation coming through. And so you go to like a lot of gigs these days, and you look around and you think, wow, there are people in their teens stretching right to people in their 70s, you know, and it's just like, this is amazing. And I've never really been aware of people being sort of even bothered by that, which they might have been in the past, even in punk, because obviously that started originally as a very youthful thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you were considered, if you were like, you know, over 24, you were over the hill, sort of thing like that.
You're a pensioner.
Yeah. And that's gone. And I think that's a good thing that's gone.
Sounds healthy to me.
It is. Yeah, I think it is. And also I think another really interesting thing is there's a lot of people I know, particularly locally, but it does seem to be the case all over, where you've now got people in their teens and 20s who've got parents, and they all go to gigs together, and they're all got this kind of, they're all into the same sort of stuff.
Sure.
And that's a source of kind of, I mean, it's take like Tony, the drummer with the Loonies. Now, his son, Jack, who I've known Jack since Jack was about 2, I think, and he used to, poor little buggy, used to come to our practices and stuff as a nipper and everything. And I remember one time he said he and his brother were coming out to a band practice, and he said to Tony, he knew they were going out for a band practice, and so he said, "All right," he said, "we're going out to play with Wheelie," because I used to feel so sorry for them. I used to leave the others getting on with practicing and go off and sort of play with the stuff they brought with them and everything. Sure. And now Jack must be in his early 30s, I suppose now. And handful of years ago, he organised one of the Plymouth Punks picnics and all this sort of stuff. So he was the kingpin of that and all this sort of thing. And to see that sort of thing is wonderful. And that's not an isolated thing, because you've got Billy, who's in the band, well, she's in 2 bands, the Butt Plug Babies and Scumfuzz. She plays bass in one and drums in another. Again, I've known her since she was about 4. And I went to a gig that she organised like last week and that sort of thing. And it sort of, not having offspring myself as well, it kind of makes me feel really proud that I just sort of think, I've known them since they're absolute nippers, and they're now very much continuing.
The spirit is alive.
Yeah. That gives me so much joy.
Sure. And hope as well, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, take the Plymouth Punks picnic. I mean, it's now in its like, I don't know, I've lost count. It's 26th year or something.
Incredible.
And for me, that, if you like, was my baby, basically. And I just feel such a warm, fuzzy joy when I'm seeing these new people taking it over and running it. It is now none of my business, however they run it, but I really approve of the way they're doing it. I think, you're keeping it real, which is, that's great. So I can retire and die happy.
Well, something you touched on a bit earlier that I think is interesting is the Emperor's New Clothes. What did you mean by that exactly? As in almost like the illusion of punk, but not actual adherence to it, or take it away?
Yeah, pretty much. I suppose it's going back to the bravery thing and going back to the looking at things a bit differently. And I think quite often, I think it's very easy to, let's say, if you've spent X amount of years in the sort of realms of punk and the genre of punk and whatever you want, the scene, movement, whatever people want to call it, the umbrella of it is what I like. It's not necessarily regurgitating the same old. It's keep looking at things afresh. And sometimes people don't like that. People don't like you sort of calling out things, and people don't like you saying, well hang on a minute. It's constantly questioning things. I think that's it.
And people don't like change?
Yeah. And I think so.
Even punks.
So exactly. So sometimes even within your own camp, I think you've also got to have a certain bravery, which I haven't got. I haven't got to the degree that I'd like to have, but to actually sort of say, I can't think of any particular examples off the top of my head, but to actually just, again, question how things are all the time.
Yeah. That's pretty vital.
People often don't like it because it gets them out of their kind of comfort zones, which is understandable. But, there's that old thing, isn't there? The old bit of graffiti, which it says question everything, which I was sort of brought up to do. And I love, obviously there's the counter thing where someone says, don't tell me what to do, and all this sort of stuff, so you can't win. But I think there's a lot of good in that. I think to keep things, that's the thing with punk. I think what I love about it is not all aspects of it, granted, but there are certain aspects of it that have evolved and adapted. Because I think if they hadn't, no one would be into it now. It would have died. It would have died a long time ago.
Sure.
So I think that adaptability and that questioning and that, do we need to do things in the same old way, or shall we look at things from a different angle? I think it's really important.
Well, it's the thirst for the new, surely, in a big way.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No. That's it. That's exactly it. No, that's really. So
and if that dies, that's when you're going to start to become probably prematurely middle-aged more.
Yeah.
Is if that fucks off.
Yeah.
And you stop being curious.
Things could become very stale. You go along and again, it's not just like bands. It's the whole aspects of it. It's the way that people sort of. It's that the big stumbling block when people sort of say, well, that's how it's always been done. And you sort
Don't change it.
Yeah. And you sort of think that it's not very progressive. That's the thing.
It could be better.
Yeah. I'm not saying that there aren't things that have always been done certain ways that don't still work and aren't still relevant and aren't still good. But people shouldn't get, what's the word? Complacent.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I think, keep on looking at things differently, waking up and thinking differently and questioning stuff and trying things out new, trying things out in a different way. And again, that's why I get so excited about new acts and bands and all the new ideas that people have, because it just keeps it exciting. It keeps people on their toes. And that is, like you say, that is healthy. I think. So overall, I mean, with punk, I feel very positive about it, as long as people will still do that. Which, there is a great deal of it. I find it very encouraging. I'm now where I used to be inspired and influenced by the kind of old guard that I was looking up to, who'd been at it for sort of 5-10 years or what have you. I'm now feeling that same inspiration and encouragement and stuff by the fresh new people who are becoming involved in
Interesting.
it. That to me is almost more inspiring in a way. Because I like to sort of think, wow, I hadn't thought of things like that before, and that's a good way of doing it, and you're playing that sort of stuff like that. It's like, that's actually great.
Well, there's a line I sort of tell myself I think is important, is remind yourself you'll keep on being surprised. Just simple as that. Just don't ever get to a weird, cynical place where you get too jaded.
Yeah.
Where you think all the surprises are done, nothing new ever will happen again, I know what I like, I know who I want to be friends with, everyone else can go fuck itself, and you just get into a sort of weird Terminator Dalek death race to the end.
No, that's so true. That is so true.
Stay open. You will be surprised.
Yeah.
If you lose that, you're fucked. I think.
Yeah.
You have to remind yourself, to again, and obviously a good way to do it like you do is to plug into the new stuff directly. What the kids are doing. Cool. Rather than become some jaded old bastard. It's not fun for anyone.
No. I mean, as long as it's got a bit of, as long as there's always again, I suppose it's like what people say about successful sort of relationships and stuff is that as long as there is a little bit of kind of almost give and take, and it's a two-way thing. I think that's brilliant. I mean, whatever they might say behind my back, the nice thing is I feel very accepted by the kind of new guard as well.
Sure.
Which is lovely.
Yeah.
I don't care what they say behind my back. They're just nice to my face. So that's all right.
You haven't got to hear that other stuff.
No, so I don't go home after a gig and cry,
Well, tell me about your childhood. Were you a rebellious child?
In a word, or not in a word, but in some words, I think thinking about that, it's extremely difficult to be, not impossible, but it's extremely difficult to be a rebellious child when you have rebellious parents. And I certainly was blessed with rebellious parents.
Right.
And the more time goes on and the older I get, the more I actually appreciate the influence they had on me in their own forms of rebellion. So I'm not saying necessarily that it has to be your parents that you rebel against, because you can be rebellious in other ways. I think if I'd rebelled against my parents, it would have been if I'd sort of strived to become a bank manager or something.
Yeah, an accountant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That would have been.
Goodbye, mother, father. Like John Major or something.
It was like, I don't know. It was like, I mean, when I was 12, I remember I was very, very seriously keen on becoming a vicar. It was something I was really, really interested in. And it was actually my mum that kind of put me off the idea. And it was because I remember she understood where I was coming from, and she sort of understood why I was going into that area, that sort of thing. And she said, you won't like it, because she said, you will be, thwarted right, left and centre because of the kind of almost, she kind of knew that I'd want to do it in an unorthodox kind of way, which probably wouldn't get me very far. Not necessarily, of course, but that's just a little example that sprung to my mind.
Sure.
After saying about accountants and bank managers and stuff. But, so I think, yeah, I certainly, I wasn't rebellious in my early years. I wasn't rebellious at home because I couldn't be.
Yeah,
because
just continuing a theme there.
Yeah, that's it. Because I had rebellious parents.
Sure. But as you became adolescent, more autonomous.
Yeah. I think as I became adolescent, I think that's when I rebelled, and I rebelled against my own age group. I rebelled against my peers. I rebelled against people I went to school with. Also,
you're in school, so that's different arena.
Yeah. So I was a bit of a late starter when it came to being kind of rebellious at school. And that was probably started when I was about 15, I reckon. And it sort of went, well, depending which way you look at it, uphill or downhill after that. But that wasn't so much. I think I generally started rebelling more at school in general at that stage. But it was the people I went to school with, even as opposed to the teachers, because I found, well, I said to someone the other day, and I apologise to anybody who was born around this time, because I do know the loveliest people who were, but I have a theory that 1971 was the Chinese year of the twat, because most people that I went to school with who were born in about 71, it was just something about them. I don't know.
Bad crop.
Oh, terrible crop. terrible crop. I felt so out of place.
Complete washout.
And it was funny because I stayed on, much to my surprise, I did stay on in the sixth form and did A-levels and stuff. And that was basically because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So I thought, might as well, for the first time, here's joy. I can go to school, but if I want to leave, I can leave.
Sure.
Great. And that was the first time in years that I had actually enjoyed school, because I remember joining a band and everything, and they were in the year above me. So, because you had the upper sixth and the lower sixth, and I was suddenly getting on well with the lot in the upper sixth. And I was absolutely gutted when it came to the following year, when all that lot left. In fact, there were people I was at school with in my year who wondered why I was still there the following year.
He's one of those guys.
They thought I was in the year above.
Sure.
And I remember thinking, oh no, I've got another year with these goobers. Unfortunately, I then became friends with the people who were in the lower sixth.
That's funny.
And joined another band, which was with them and that sort of thing. So I just never really hit it off with my own age group, as in that exact age group. A year younger, year older, great.
71 twats, and then 70 and 72. Legend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. And that actually carries on to this day.
There still are twats, people from that.
Yes. Often I meet somebody and I think there's something...
71?
Yeah.
A touch of the 71 about you, sir.
Exactly. It's invariably, it's right. There's someone I think, there's something I don't like about you.
What, you could put it down to a month? You seem like a Jew in 71.
When were they born? 71. I knew it.
That
said, though, there are exceptions, of course, always.
Sure.
Because Chris, who's the guitarist with the Loonies, he is a whole day younger than me, so we could barely be closer in age, and he's a delight. He's an absolute love. So it's not all of them.
Sure.
It's all of them except for Chris.
all bar two.
And I was just convinced I was born in the wrong year.
Interesting. Possibly. There's some people who subscribe to that kind of theory.
Yeah.
Wrong time.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a year out.
It was definitely, there was something wrong with that year.
Sure.
So, but hooray for them, because it really did.
It's way to rebel against.
Yeah.
I'm not with these guys.
That is exactly it. That was exactly what happened. Yeah. So I think my rebellion there, that was formed there for that reason. I was rebelling against the people I went to school with, more than anybody.
Interesting.
But
it's got to be very unusual. I don't
know. I mean, everything sort of went a bit more downhill in general with the school thing, because it was things like, I remember being in the sixth form, I was doing history at A-level, and I basically got thrown out of it. And so I ended up not doing history at A-level. And when I was doing O-level, French, I actually got thrown out of that as well, because I was in the top group for a few years. And then when I would have been about, again, 15, and I ended up, we had the end of year exams. I ended up apparently getting 3%, which is like kind of almost impossible.
Difficult to achieve.
Yeah. And I had to go and see the head of department, who fortunately had a good sense of humour, because he found it hysterical.
It's funny.
He said, I've never known a mark that bad. And he said, to be honest with you, he said, you're in the top group of 5. And he said, you've done so badly, it's pointless even sort of sending you right down to the bottom group. So
take you outside and shoot you.
So he said, what other subjects are you doing? And I was telling him, he said, well, is there any chance you could do sort of extra art or something? So I said, well, all right. I said, if that's allowed, then I'll do it. So that was, and it was quite ironic that years down the line, after having been thrown out of doing French O-level and then thrown out of doing history A-level, I would then years later join a band and become very good friends with a woman who's French and a history teacher.
Interesting.
The two things that I kind of had the dunce's cap for.
Did she try and get you banned from wherever you were? Sling him out.
But yeah, so it did have a sort of effect on me in general at school, but it did stem from that. And it's because I really had, by that stage, I'd really kind of, the whole punk thing was such a kind of new and exciting thing for me. It was at that age, from 15 onwards, it was like, I'm not really interested in all this school stuff anymore. I'm just interested in wanting to kind of be in bands and make records and write songs and write fanzines and, all the things with it. Which I think stood me in better stead than if I'd done French or history. So that's obviously a matter of debate. My life could be quite different by now. My life could be what could be considered a success.
Could be a vicar married to a French historian. Screwed the pooch on that one.
That's true.
Here's what you could have won. Would you describe yourself as an entrepreneur?
I suppose the funny thing is with an entrepreneur is it instantly makes me think of, I suppose wrongly actually, but the word entrepreneur makes me think of some kind of successful business person.
Suit, office kind of stuff.
Yeah. But a successful business person, I ain't. But I suppose entrepreneur, yes, in so much as I did set up my own business after I left school, and it's still going. How it's still going, I don't quite know, but it is. I suppose by adapting again, really, a bit like the whole punk thing we were talking about. But and I suppose to be an entrepreneur, I suppose you gotta, it is sort of setting up your own business. It is taking risks, I suppose, really.
Well, the spirit's quite adjacent to punk, surely.
Yeah, so in that
agency,
respect,
new ideas.
Yeah, so in that respect, yes, I suppose so. I don't think of myself as that, but thinking of it, yeah, I suppose, really. I think probably I prefer
wheelie dealing.
Yes, I was going to say yes. I prefer chancer.
A travelling man.
Yes,
a wayfarer. Sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is down to the fact of I kind of, what motivates me more than anything, I think, is the fact that I don't want to
take rules from other people.
Yes, really, I've still got that. That's the thing.
I'm the same.
Tried it, don't like it.
Yeah, ain't for me. I think if you're wired that way, you just can't escape it.
No, I think you're absolutely
That's why
right.
you couldn't be a vicar, because you would have been rebelling against your actual nature. Never mind what your parents are doing or anything else. It's just your internal wiring is, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Above all else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And to clarify for people, what is your business chancing emporium?
Oh, right.
Emporium of Chance would be quite a fun name for a punk.
Yeah, the Emporium of Chance. I like that. I mean, that's brilliant. Well, the Emporium of Chance, it started... How did it start?
Soon after school, you were saying?
Yes. Very soon after school. I think I used to... Again, because I was taking an interest at that stage in local bands. I was playing drums in a lot of local bands, but I was also gigging with other ones as well. And I was recording a lot of demos for bands and live recordings and that sort of thing. And I think I then decided that I sort of thought some of these bands need to be heard by other people. So I just sort of thought, right, I was saying to people, would you mind if I kind of like, distributed your, it was all tapes at the time. And at the same time, I wanted to release a compilation album with not just local bands, but some local bands, some slightly more established bands from elsewhere, in order to kind of help sell it to the less adventurous.
Sure.
And I believed it would be possible to set up I really wanted to set up a record label. That was really the idea. But I wanted to kind of demonstrate that it was possible to have a record label that could support itself, but also raise money for various causes. This was kind of the idea. And it seemed to kind of, it started. And then, that was it. That was the compilation album began first. And there was a lot of interest in it. It went rather well, actually. I recorded most of the tracks that were on there. And that was it. As a result of it, a lot of the participating bands were saying to me, could you record our demo? Could this, that and the other? We've got this demo that we've recorded elsewhere. Would you distribute it via a mail order thing?
All naturally evolved.
Yeah, and so I started doing that. I had no intention of starting a mail order business because I thought it sounds like too much hard work, which it was. But I ended up doing it, and gradually, because it certainly at that time, this was like the very late 80s, and at that time, it was very common practice for people that ran record labels and tape labels and stuff to trade stuff, basically. So someone would have released, like, sort of some, I don't know, 7-inch EP or something, and someone else like me had done a compilation tape. And so what they'd do is they'd say, right, I'll send you a box of my records, you send me a box of your tapes, and we'll just, so no money is exchanging hands, but then we'll go and sell them elsewhere.
Sure.
And that's how it kind of unintentionally started to grow. And it became a bigger thing and bigger thing. And I used to do a catalogue every couple of months. And it was more like a fanzine than just a catalogue, because I would review everything that I had in stock.
Nice.
So I'd review the records that I was accumulating and the tapes, and then that then grew to things like T-shirts was another thing, and fanzines as well, and more and more and more and more kind of different sort of products really were coming out of it. And one of the things that and I also was putting on gigs at that time as well. Quite regularly. And a lot of them were fundraiser gigs. I started releasing actual records, went into that, and that's how I met a lot of other bands elsewhere. And that sort of grew and grew. And at one point, and I'm so grateful this happened, I started to stock hair dye, because I wanted to dye my hair green. You could not get green hair dye in the Southwest. It's a funny thing to imagine now, but you could not get green hair dye. Just the closest place I could get it from was Cardiff. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. It's like, so I got in touch with, the makers of the dye and sort of said, do you sell wholesale? I got the minimum amount of pots that you could get when you were a wholesaler from them, and listed that in the catalogue, and that sort of picked up a bit. And I'm really glad I did, because eventually what happened was, because of the introduction of, because there were the attempts to make vinyl obsolete at that time. I saw an advert for, there was I think it was a Melody Maker or something from like about 30 years ago now. And there was an advert for some band, I can't remember what the band was, but an album that they'd just released. And this is hysterical to think of it now. It was like they were advertising this album available on CD, and it was $10.99, or also available on LP/cassette, $7.99. And you're thinking how things have changed, because now the vinyl is the thing that's the big money maker.
Yeah.
That's come back into favour. But at that time, that was a struggling thing, because obviously the major music industry were trying, for whatever reason, to phase out vinyl. And I think to a great degree, I think the punk labels and the independent labels and stuff really, against all odds, kept the vinyl thing going when it was difficult. It was at one point, nobody was interested in vinyl, which is a really odd thing to think
probably
of.
mid-2000s, kind of a dead time for that stuff.
Yeah.
2010s starts to pick up again.
Absolutely. And so there was that to compete with. There was also to compete with was the whole things like the download side of things. And it did seem, for, again, the same era that you're talking about, it did seem like it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
These are, these physical sort of copies of music and stuff are going to become obsolete. But fortunately, sort of bloody mindedness and determination on a lot of people's parts kept it going, and now it's booming really. But I was during that kind of time, I was so grateful that I what had started off as a little sideline, which was the hair dye, suddenly became the only thing I was selling. It was just the hair dye, and that sort of grew. Because of course at that stage you're thinking, well, that's the only thing that people can't download yet. That'll change. So that kind of kept it going. So fortunately I've managed to keep that mail order business going one way or another, but I'm now wanting to hopefully go back into the vinyl side of things again, because I'm just so pleased that's not stopped. And that's what I always wanted to do in the first place anyway. The putting the gigs on thing was sort of hand in hand with it, but that ended up being just like a really, really expensive hobby. How people, I admire people that put on gigs now and they actually seem to kind of keep body and soul together. I don't know how they do it.
It's draining, isn't it, to coordinate it, the logistics and just energy and time.
Yeah. And this is why I've reached a stage now where I'm sorry, because I'm probably jumping the gun a bit here, but this is why I've reached a stage now where I'm sort of easing things up on the band front for me personally. I'm going to carry on with one band, but the other three that I play with, I'm going to be finishing at some certain stages over the next few months, really. I don't want to leave it completely because I know I'd suddenly realise that I had no other life.
Still at home doing a crossword like, fuck, this can't be all there is.
Exactly.
What did I used to do?
That's it. But yeah, so that's the bit. So I suppose in a sense, I suppose I can take comfort in the fact that I could say that the Ruptured Ambitions, the business side of things, I suppose it's been a success of sorts because it's still going. Yeah. I think that's the thing.
And it sustained you.
And yeah. I mean, in 36 years.
Wow.
So that's not bad, really.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, you can reclaim the word entrepreneur. I think it suits.
Yeah, all right then. I'll accept that.
They're all different kinds. All right, to recommence. What are some of your favourite gig experiences?
Oh, I know. I mean, in that.
That can be legally divulged.
that now narrows it down.
We've got it down to 3.
Somewhat frantically, actually. Well, because it's funny actually thinking about it. Thinking about my favourite gig experiences are usually linked with, alright, more often than not, I think the overriding thing when I look back at gig experiences that I particularly enjoy, it's usually to do with audience participation.
Right.
They're the gigs where if I feel that the audience has somehow, either intentionally or unintentionally, the audience has become involved. It's usually when I go home afterwards and think that was the best gig ever. That was brilliant. Sure. Because you can't beat that, because that's, I suppose in a way, that's the sort of like the, if an audience wants to be involved in what you're doing, that's almost like the ultimate seal of approval. Yeah, I think in a way, and it makes you feel that you must be doing something right because people want to join in. Yeah,
well, it's about chemistry, isn't it, between you and them?
Yeah. So in that respect, I think, but it's funny because most of my favourite gig experiences that I could think of, again, which have been involved with audience participation, have usually resulted in the band being banned from a venue.
Too much fun was had.
Well, yes!
Don't come back.
This is it. A very prime example of that, of too much fun was had. You're right. A very prime example of that was, this was the Loonies again. We played, we played a gig in the Underground in Plymouth. It was when it was in its very kind of embryonic stage. It was a very different club to the club it is now. It was a lot more kind of, it was a very kind of, had a very 80s vibe to it. It was very, I remember it was very neon and stainless steel and stuff. I mean, completely different to what it's like now. And it was a more kind of slick, trendy, swish kind of place. Somehow, I don't know how, but the Loonies got a gig there. I don't seem to remember there was even a stage in the club at the time. It was quite, remembering it is like remembering a completely different venue to the place it is now. But anyway, we played a gig there, and I remember that the manager at the time, she didn't take kindly to us at all. I don't know what we'd done to upset her, but she, excuse me, she didn't like us. And that's right. She started coming over to me, and she was having a go at me because, shock horror, people were dancing to the band. So I couldn't believe my ears, and I thought, well, what does she want? So I made an announcement and basically got everyone to sit on the floor, which they did, which really surprised me. But I thought, yes, excellent. Everyone's now sat down. And I said, right, nobody move, everyone behave themselves and all this sort of stuff, because we've been told, you're dancing, it's not acceptable in a nightclub. And anyway, she was fuming about that. That didn't go down very well at all. What happened after that was a little bit of karma, really, because the following week, there was a mate of mine had a birthday party, and she'd asked me to DJ for it. And weirdly, at the time, the decks that they had were actually behind the bar. So unfortunately for this poor manager of the Underground, who had been pissed off with me the week before because I got everyone to sit down because she complained about the dancing, she then had to put up with being behind the bar with me for the entire evening while this party was going on. And another time when we got people to sit down and actually got banned from a venue was we played at Plymouth University, and we did a song, again, audience participation. We did a song that involved people hitting each other with like sort of foam kind of custard pie type things that we had on these paper plates.
Nice.
On the stage. I didn't know how I should have known actually, but how quite enthusiastic people would become in that, and there was this complete sort of like foam bath of custard pies and everyone going mental. We weren't invited back after that. Oh, that was it. But at that gig, I think it was the same gig, I remember saying at one point before the mayhem started, and I remember saying, right, someone had broken a string or something, and so I said, right, okay, I'm going to tell everyone a story. Everyone sit down, I'm going to tell you a story. Anyway, they just all did again. And you sort of think, bloody hell, I didn't think anyone was going to take any notice at all. Shit, what story am I going to tell them? And I panicked because I didn't think anyone was listening. And that was a glorious feeling. But so, yeah, there was a lot of audience participation went on. We did a gig in Newton Abbot, again, that involved shaving foam and people getting carried away. And we got banned from there. So a lot of my favourite experiences really weirdly tie in with getting banned from local venues.
I suppose that also makes it definitive.
It does.
That's the one time I did there and it went fucking well.
It does.
I'll never go back.
It does. We played a gig in the Bank. It was a really bizarre place, but the pub by the theatre. Very weird. And they've got this kind of weird sort of mezzanine sort of split level thing. And that was where the stage was. And then you've got sort of stairs that go up there and then stairs that go up to the next bar. And I decided that I wanted to hurl myself down sort of like kind of country and western sort of cowboy film style down these stairs. And I did it once, and I thought, wow, I must have made myself really limp. That worked really well. And I then went up for an encore and did it a second time, and it really hurt. And but they didn't take kindly to that sort of shenanigans either, actually. So that was another one. So yeah, I think in a perverse sort of way, some of my favourite gig memories, or my favourite gigs, gig experiences, usually involved just getting banned. I've remembered one. This was a lovely bit of, my biggest regret was that this happened during a time when people didn't really film gigs, because of course nowadays you go to a gig, it's pretty much bound to be filmed by somebody. CDS, a band that I drum with, we played a gig in the basement of a cafe in Torquay called Planet Marmalade, and there was this basement, windowless basement, and there was just this sort of like one toilet just off the right next to where the band were playing. It was just this tiny little room. What happened was it was the end of the gig, and for some reason people decided they were going to start dismantling the drum kit. I suppose they were trying to tell me something, actually, as in like, shut up. And they started dismantling the kit, and I carried on drumming, and the other two carried on playing, and I was ended up sort of like just with
hitting sticks together,
pretty much playing the floor and playing a radiator, that sort of thing. And then these people, excuse me, it was almost as if it had been planned and choreographed. Random people, didn't know half of them. They then started bringing the drums back and sort of putting it back together. So again, carried on playing until ended up with a full kit again. I wish that had been filmed.
It was like an art installation or performance art piece.
It was.
How would he react if we disassembled the drum kit and then reassembled it?
That was lovely. I mean, that was a lovely gig experience. It was so surreal. But again, I think the common thread in that is the audience participation. For me, that kind of makes it.
Well, it almost bleeds into circus more then, doesn't it? Beyond gig, it becomes something else.
Yeah. And that is just that's wonderful.
Like a review piece or, I don't know, something. What's your craziest band story? So separate to gigs, it could be travelling on a bus, it could be crazy service station shenanigans, or I don't know.
Right.
Big cock-ups.
I think for that, I've got to go... Definitely, I've got to go over to another band I drummed with, Oi Polloi, band from Edinburgh.
It's a good name for a band.
Now, Oi Polloi, who are still going now, they were kind of they've been going for quite some time when I joined them, actually. I think they've now been going for about 45 years, something like that. I joined them when the band was it'd been going for about 14 years, I think. Oh my God, that's true, actually. Shit. They were comparatively new in those days. I had no idea how old everyone was. How everyone is now. Oi Polloi, I was with them for a few years, and they used to go on massive tours, ridiculously big tours. When I first joined them, the reason I actually got into that band, because it seems a bit weird that I joined a band from Edinburgh, and it was because when I was set up the record label, they were a band that I released an EP of, and I put on some gigs of theirs, and we played gigs together and that sort of thing with CDS, and so they knew I was a drummer, and I think they'd reached a stage where they'd run out of all drummers in Edinburgh, probably in Scotland, I think, at this stage, and so they got in touch and said, right, we're doing a 40-day tour with 38 dates in 40 days of mainland Europe, basically.
Wow.
I'd never, at the time I was 23, I'd never been out of the country before, so I sort of thought, I've got to do this, because I thought I will probably never get the chance again to do anything like this. So I did that. That was ridiculous. I've got a whole load of surreal stories, which fortunately for me, I kept a diary, a tour diary. I'm not normally disciplined enough to keep a diary in daily life. I wish I was, but I'm just not. But when we were touring, I was keeping a tour diary. I'm so glad I did, because I'm now in the process of writing out in neat, so for public consumption, basically. But the second tour we did, which was again a load of countries and a load of gigs and dates and stuff, that was particularly surreal, and it was touring with that band made me realise why people go a bit balmy when they tour long term. And I think probably one of the craziest things, there were a lot, but I think was when we played in Bratislava. The whole thing is Deke, the singer, he's very good at languages, and he's particularly fluent in German. And we were driving into Bratislava, and we'd done a lot of Germany and stuff, and usually Deke was the one who was acting as translator and everything for signs and stuff, basically not the people, because everyone spoke English. But it was weird. That's right, it was a really weird setup, because we didn't know where we were playing. We knew it was in not a usual venue. We didn't know where it was. And the guy that was putting us on was meeting us at the train station. So we drove into Bratislava, and then we said to Deke, right, what's Slovakian for train station? And he said, oh, I don't know. I was thinking it was going to be something like something similar to what it is in German, but I don't think it is. And so anyways, we had no idea where we were going. We didn't know where the train station was. And so we stopped off in the town centre, city centre, and that was like one of these big maps of the thing. We were having a look to see if there was any kind of symbol that resembled a train station, basically. We couldn't see anything. We were having a look at this map. And this girl came up to us, and she just said, "Oi polloi." And we said, oh yeah, it was me and the bass player, and we just said, yeah, that's right. And she went, oh, come with me. And she had like a market stall which was selling sort of breads and cakes and things like that. And she proudly produced this massive, great sort of gingerbread heart with all this icing on it, and it had Oi polloi, whatever the date was in July 1995, Bratislava, and all this sort of thing. She'd made this for. We thought how random that this was. That she had this thing. We happened to be standing by her stall looking for this train station, and she knew who we were as well, which is really weird. Now, bearing in mind, and this is an important part of the next bit of the story. Bearing in mind, we'd been on tour for quite a long time at this stage. We all looked kind of really ropey, really rough, really dodgy, basically.
And going slightly mad by this point?
And going very mad by this point. So we explained to her that we wanted to find the train station because that way we were going to be taken to the gig. And she said, no. She said, it's all right, don't worry. I know where the gig is. I'll come with you. So she got someone else to look after her stall. She got into this car. Now she was older than she looked, but she looked about 12. And so she was in the car with these 5 really sort of rough, smelly, sort of bearded, dodgy looking geezers with flies buzzing around them. And she kept getting lost, and we kept stopping, and she was like going out, and she was asking people who were waiting at bus stops because this was the thing. It turned out where we were playing was in an alley. Right? So she's getting out of the car and saying to these very suspicious looking people, well, they weren't suspicious, they looked like they were suspicious of us, very wary people. And she was saying, I want to take these 5 dodgy looking blokes to a back alley.
We must hurry.
We eventually got there. And what it was one of these sort of back roads, which was next to several blocks of flats. And so it was one of these roads that basically had all these garages that belonged to the flats, basically. And on either side of this road was a row of probably like about 200 garages, I reckon. Just either side of this road, nothing else. And our so-called stage was right in the middle, in this garage with this sort of like, lifted up front to it and everything. And so we were in there. That was our stage. And all these punks were like all around this road, all sitting on the roofs of the other garages, all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Quite a scene.
It was wonderful. We never, experienced anything quite like that. We played some surreal places, but this was great. And, there was probably about 300 people there, I reckon. And next minute, we're halfway through the set playing, and at one end of the road, there's this screech of tyres, and this massive great van pulls up, and a whole load of neo-Nazi skinheads get out, all brandishing sort of various weapons and clubs and God knows what else, CS gas and chair legs and stuff and everything. And they all came out. There was like about a dozen of them came out this van ready to sort of cause havoc at exactly the same time. And this is where it becomes really, really like it was, I sometimes question, if I hadn't kept these tour diaries, I'd be questioning my memory now.
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah. Screech of tyres again. And these 2 police vans come round. The top part of the road, and these coppers get out with their batons and their shields and all this sort of stuff. There's probably about 24 of them. So we're sort of thinking, right, hang on a minute, there's these very violent looking Nazi skinheads down there. There's these very violent looking, sort of not very friendly bobbies down there with all their batons and stuff like that. They then were clocking the fact that in the middle was about 300 stinking punk rockers. They all went back in their vans and fucked off at the same time. There was just this standoff moment, and they just all just turned, boom, fled, didn't come back.
That'd be a good scene in a film.
It was remembering it was like it was watching a film. It was absolutely brilliant.
That is crazy.
And that was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And it was only topped off by the fact that shortly after, this is all the same night. This is where I sort of question my memory and question how my sanity was at that time, because I could have made all this up. Because I remember we spent the night in one of the flats, in one of the blocks of flats. And we were in there, and I remember we went in there, and there was an Australian girl who was sat at the kitchen table who was also staying in this flat overnight. And I was having a chat with her, and after about half an hour, we discovered that we knew each other, and her band, who were a band from Australia called Mutiny, were a band that I used to sell their stuff through my catalogue. But we'd never met. And we met in Bratislava after this bizarre, surreal
just to
gig.
cap it off.
It was...
Bloody hell. That is mental.
So yeah, but I'm definitely in the throes of piecing together all these tales. There was just so many. With Oi Polloi particularly, there was for some reason that band just attracted the most surreal, ridiculous.
Could make a great book one day.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. That's what
Excellent.
I'm definitely doing.
Great idea.
Definitely got to do that. Definitely got to write out my tour diaries.
Why is a local music scene important?
Which I personally believe, it is massively important, and I think where we're, and I think this is why I think Plymouth particularly is. I know a lot of people from elsewhere are very fond of the Plymouth scene, and they're very almost envious of it.
Yeah, it seems very vibrant.
Very, very much. It's almost reached a level now where it's kind of too vibrant because there's so much going on. Yeah, so much going on. It's so difficult, particularly at weekends, to you just sort of think events are going to clash, and they do. Yeah. I mean, it's not unusual now for there to be. I think a lot of this is to do with where we're particularly blessed these days. Is this city has got so many supportive venues for these punk gigs.
That's a key part of it, isn't it? The ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think because we've got so many, it's not unusual for there to be 3 completely clashing events where, this happened the other weekend where everyone was sort of saying, I don't know which one to go to because it's all going on. And generally speaking,
spoiled for choice.
People spread themselves out. They are. But why? I mean, it's important. So, this is where I think it is good. I suppose it's important because I think as well as a sense of, with punk, you've got the sense of the punk community as a whole, and people do like a sense of belonging, because I think if you've got a sense of belonging, community, that in itself can, it can make people very productive and inventive and that sort of thing, because people feel they're being supported and all this sort of stuff. And I think also it's sort of important to have roots as well, because I feel a bit, so you do get cases of like local bands, for example, who don't play locally, which I find a bit of a shame, because I understand why, but I also think it's a bit of a pity, because it's almost like you almost, rightly or wrongly, but you almost feel that they're feeling the grass is greener elsewhere. But I think fundamentally, I think a local scene is important because it's a security blanket in a way. It promotes a lot of, inventiveness and productivity and what have you. But it gives people a base, I think, and I think that is important. It gives people that sort of like that hub. And I think if you come from a healthy local scene, then it in turn, like for example, you're going to get more supportive venues. Yeah. You're also then going to get more people who want to, avail themselves of these places and support.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a mutual back scratching thing, and I think it's very important. Something I used to find a great pity was years ago, when I was first putting on gigs. And I put on gigs because they weren't happening at the time. That was the thing. I'm so pleased now there are people putting on gigs, because I think, you sort of feel a little bit like, well, my job is done. I've done it. Sure. I've done it. But I remember when I was first putting on gigs, I used to get quite annoyed by, none of my bloody business, to be honest with you, but I still used to get annoyed by it, by the fact that you'd have movers and shakers in the local scene, who would look at Plymouth, which at the time was not vibrant at all, and they would say, sod this, I'm going to where it's at, which would usually be Bristol, Brighton would be another one, London, of course, where there was stuff already going on.
So rather than create something, just go towards where it's already happening.
And that used to annoy me a bit, because I used to sort of think, that's a bit...
But also there's no agency there, is there? Or there's less. It can be seen as a cop-out. Going back to the start of the conversation, punk being agency, that would be to create your own thing.
Yes.
In line with how you feel.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So, that used to bother me a bit. But at the same time, I think it used to make me and other people kind of more determined that we were gonna, it was sort of at that time, like Plymouth, 1980, 1990, and we were just about managing to find places to put on gigs and events and stuff. There were plenty of bands, they just weren't the places to play. And we were kind of sort of determined that was going to happen, little knowing that all this time since, and it would just become like, bloody hell, there's too much going on.
That's the ultimate success. That's the ultimate success, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is to get to that level, the apotheosis of it.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way, to say there's too much going on is probably a bit unfair of me, actually, because there obviously isn't, actually, because there are enough people now to support these things.
Sure. So
you're not really, where we were kind of lucky if we managed to get one sort of punk-friendly venue, and we were able to fill it out, so that was good. But now you've got like about 7 or 8 punk-friendly venues, and they all have good turnouts. So there must be a big old scene going on. So it's grown, But
also, do you think healthy culture of a city adds to the overall quality of life of a place?
Yes.
For everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like in terms of how they measure the metrics of it, I think it does.
Definitely.
If you feel like there's stuff going on, people are expressing themselves, there's freedom, there's agency, individuality, colour, you feel happier to live there. Because you're like, there's life here, literally.
Exactly. Yes, you're not sort of thinking, there's nothing ever happens here, it's a dead end town, whatever, because there's a lot.
Yeah, and also it's too easy and too, again, jaded to just say that.
Yeah.
And write a place off.
Yeah.
And fuck off to Bristol or London or wherever.
Exactly.
I firmly believe in starting something wherever you are.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Create it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just how I'm wired. Well, you are too, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think, yeah, without a doubt. So, I feel very, very pleased with how things are, actually. It is vitally important, as you say, for those reasons, because like you say, it goes beyond even the realms of your own little kind of niche or clique or scene or whatever. It goes beyond that, definitely.
It adds to the culture of the place.
Yeah.
Again, the ecosystem idea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very much so. So yes, I think it's vital, really. And I think this place is doing pretty well at the moment.
Yeah,
really,
it's good to me. So Chris, Wheelie, Mon Brave, and other epithets, too many to list. How have you aged disgracefully? We're kind of going back to the start here in terms of punk and all that stuff, and not becoming a jaded old cunt, etc.
That's something you probably summed it up. I think I've been very fortunate. I think I've been extremely fortunate because I kind of I think it's fortunate. Other people would think it would be a terrible failure. Yeah. But sort of unintentionally, I suppose, there was another band that I released a record by. It was a band from Belfast called the Dangerfields. And there's a tale to tell you about them.
That's for the book.
It is for the book.
Sure.
It basically involved their visit to Plymouth, was where a couple of them ended up stealing a boat with the intention of sailing to Brazil.
That is legendary. I heartily approve.
Anyway, round about that time, I released a record of theirs, and they did a song. One of their songs they did was called 17 Forever. And it's either sadly or joyously, I'm not quite sure, people can take it as they will. I sort of think that's probably been unintentionally, that's been my life, because I sort of think I'm doing most of what my life involves today is the same as it was. I mean, I first started playing in bands when I was like about 14. And I'm blessed because there hasn't been one single day since then when I haven't been a member of one band or another.
Wow.
Sort of thing, which is like...
That is incredible.
So if that ever the time came when I suddenly found myself bandless, I'd feel complete. I wouldn't know what to do with myself, you know?
So don't give them all up.
No, that's it. So I'm giving up the three of them and staying in one and hope the other one doesn't kick me out. Yeah, so I mean, that's brilliant. So because of that, I think that sort of that's contributed to the fact that I'm still living the same sort of life as I was in my teens. And on top of that as well, I sort of think it's the fact that, you know, it's like, I've had a few grown up jobs, but managed to get out of them, and haven't sort of done a lot of the grown up things that was expected that you would.
And maybe that could warp people.
Possibly, yeah. And so I think, you know, I think that's the thing. I look at my existence and I sort of think, you know, something that I've loved about playing with the Spoils Collective is that they've all got this sense of joy and fun about them. And so quite often we'll have, a band practice and it'll be like at someone's house or something. And then half of us will go off and meet up with some other people, and then we'll go off to someone else's house and all this sort of stuff. And it's kind of like the sort of things that you normally do when you're living the life of a student, let's say. But the thing with the Spoils is there's a lovely big age range of the band, because the youngest person in the band, even with the five of us actually, the youngest person in the band is in their early 30s and the oldest one is 60. And we're all in between. Like we were talking about the punk gigs and stuff. That's that in that band. Wags to Witches are the same actually, but I realised when that band first started that we had four of us and we were all in a different decade. We had one in their 20s, one in the 30s, 40s and 50s, and it was like brilliant. And yet we were very unaware of that.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's the same with the Spoils. And I mean, for example, we're meant to be practising with the Spoils on Thursday, and we practice regularly in this lovely guy's garage that he lets us use. And they decided last week, they said, oh, it'd be really good. They said, Phil, the bloke who owns the garage, they said, can we spend the night in your garage after we've had a practice? Can we have a sleep?
Sounds fun.
And I thought, this sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
And I thought, hooray, I'm in a band with people who are as kind of kiddie-like as I am.
Yeah.
This is really good.
An adventure, yeah.
Exactly. And so that, to me, makes me sort of think, I feel like I'm in the right band with these people.
Yeah, nice.
Very
cool.
I suppose if that's a growing old disgracefully, then that's it. But it's kind of like I'm fortunate because I don't feel pressurised or obliged to behave a different way to how I've always behaved.
Sure.
But it's not a deliberate thing, if you know what I mean. It's not like I must avoid being like this, or I you know, it's just happened. It's just the way it's happened.
That's great. I don't know. I think some people fall into a trap easier. Whatever the case, you have enough what I would probably call life force that has kept on propelling you. almost like an innate gift, maybe from your parents as well. It kind of helped to almost like enough gas in the jet to keep you flying all these years, kind of.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And that's what I was saying to you. I think the further time goes on, the more I kind of actually look back at it and appreciate that kind of background, and influence. I mean, it was well, the fact that it's taken me, even now, I look back on that and I sort of think, yeah, that sort of explains a lot, really.
Yeah, sure.
Which does explain a lot because it's like, just as you can say, like the Philip Larkin thing about they fuck you up, your mum and dad, and that sort of thing. I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, that's a brilliant line. Yet in my case, I sort of think, yeah, but I'm really pleased they did.
Yeah, well, I think upbringing, I don't know, it's nature and nurture, I'd say. Because I have always been a very individualistic person, and I wasn't raised in the same household as you. But there's still plenty of chaos in my childhood. So I don't know. It's nature and nurture, I think. It's also how you respond to circumstances, like the school of the year of the twats and stuff. Whatever else. You've got to find your way, whatever context you're born into. I didn't have year of the twats, but they were year of someone else. Everyone's got the circumstances of their time, haven't they?
Yeah.
The things they rail against. There's always, fucking idiots in every crop. So part of it's lifestyle then, for you.
Yes.
Lifestyle in terms of the gig circuit, and almost like when you become famous, you get stuck in amber. 17, not the idea of, fame and everything, but you got into that lifestyle young, you've stayed in it, that can keep you at an age.
Yeah.
Who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Which is a tedious thing they say on all these grind set podcasts of like, want to be a millionaire? Surround yourself with millionaires, as if it's that simple.
Right.
But the company you keep is important.
Yes.
I would say. And attitude,
I
think, is a big part of it for you that seems to be just innate.
Right.
I don't know, could you give any advice to anyone else because I want to do it. I want to age as disgracefully as you. I do. I want to be, me and my brother use the word flag for people affectionately. Not red flag, but like a colourful flag. You're a flag.
I've got you. Yeah.
You're a cool character. You know plenty of flags, I'm sure.
Yes.
You've listed many.
Yeah.
But I want to stay that way,
Yes.
So you're an inspiration to me. So yeah, if you could give advice to someone, what would it be?
I think really it would be don't think about it too much, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
I think actually, because I think, and also because I think if you suddenly feel that there is a part of you that maybe, well, I think if there's a part of you that sort of like thinks, oh yeah, but hang on a minute, I feel like I might have become a bit jaded about such and such a thing, or a bit of a stick in the mud about something else or whatever, that's not you I'm talking about here, but just in general. I suppose then, therefore, that would be a part, to think like that about yourself would mean you weren't happy about it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, you've noticed a problem.
Yeah, yes.
I should address
and
this.
So, in which case, then yes.
Yeah.
Then yes, yeah. So, if something actually arises where you think, actually, don't like that aspect of my life, don't like the way things are going, then chances are you probably could do something about it. But I think the biggest advice is actually just really don't worry about it too much. Don't. Also, I think the other thing, and this has cost me certainly at least one previous relationship actually, which was, reminded me something about a school report actually that I had. I'll say about the relationship first of all, but a very good relationship that I had several years ago was with a girl who the pair of us had known each other we'd been friends for like about 20 years prior to getting together, which was kind of quite unusual for that sort of to happen. And that seemed to be quite a good thing, because I sort of thought, well, she knows what an idiot I am already. So that's sort
bottom paid for her.
Exactly. But the drawback was, and I do believe that sort of put paid to it, was I think I was a little bit, I didn't really look too far into the future, which is another bit of advice I'd give to somebody actually. I'm not saying don't plan anything, but don't plan ahead too far.
Yeah, don't be too prescriptive about it.
Yeah.
It must be this way.
Yeah, because things don't work like that. That's the thing. And there's a lot to be said for sort of going with the flow of things.
Definitely.
She was somebody who I think had to have, as some people do, and I understand it. I'm not saying they're wrong either, but it's not for me. But she was somebody who had to have a kind of a long-term plan.
Right.
And because I didn't, it sort of interfered with her way of thinking and all this sort of stuff, and it interfered with her view of me, because she actually quite rightly just sort of she said to me, I can't imagine my spending the rest of my life with you. And I sort of thought, I hadn't even thought of beyond next week, you know.
So you're pretty radically different people then, really.
In that respect, yes.
And I guess you wouldn't know that until you got more intimate, even after 20 years.
No, exactly. And I think that was, to my mind, that was probably one of the main problems.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of probably the most accurate school report I ever had, which was from an art teacher of mine who, bizarrely, I think he had it in his head that I was a Nazi. Although this
reminds me of Himmler. Keep an eye on him.
This had nothing to do with his school report. But the school report was the best. Well, I think the most accurate school report I ever had. He wrote it when I was like, sort of 16 or whatever. But I think it could have been written about me now by somebody. He said, Chris has got to stop trying to rely on his cat-like ability to keep landing on his feet.
Interesting.
And I thought, that's bloody good.
That is good.
And I thought, he's not wrong. But unfortunately, I still do it.
I do too.
And I think that bloke was pretty astute, actually. So, yeah, I mean, with that blessing in my life, it's held me in pretty good stead, because I have luckily had this cat-like ability to keep landing on my feet.
But a lot of that can be attitude.
Maybe,
I would say.
Maybe.
Being in harmony with the universe kind of through positive attitude.
Maybe. But yeah, so difficult. But I think fundamentally, just to say, yeah, try not to sweat it, dude.
Sure.
It's the main bit of advice.
Still good. Concise.
Yeah.
Score report for everyone else. All right, for my last question, if you could form a supergroup, roaming band of troubadours, what have you, with 3 musicians, living or dead, who would they be?
That one, I think that to me is massively difficult, because I think because it would have to be people who have been massively influential, I think. There are a lot of people, for example, that I really, I'm a big fan of, who are in bands, musicians and stuff, but I wouldn't want to be in a band with them. I think prime example is somebody who fascinates me, who's now one of the dead ones, but Mark E. Smith from The Fall. I find the guy absolutely fascinating. I love their stuff. When he was alive, I remember actually saying to Lou from Wags to Witches, I remember talking about him, and I said to her, love the guy's stuff. I said, but if he rang me up tomorrow and wanted me to join his band, I wouldn't, because I would end up absolutely hating it and end up probably hating him and all this sort of stuff.
Because he was too serious, too unpredictable, I don't know, volatile?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Right.
I don't think he was a joy to be in a band.
Right. A difficult person.
I think he was a difficult person.
Sure.
But 3 people, well, again, I'm really fortunate, because I've had to think about this, and one person who I have been in a band with very briefly, because he actually joined the Loonies for a couple of gigs, but I would love to be in a band with him again, is Dick Lucas from Citizen Fish and Subhumans and Culture Shock, because he was a very early influence upon me. Again, when I was about 15 and I started writing to him, and we then ended up becoming friends and stuff. He's been sort of pretty constant in my life for like nearly 40 years.
Wow. And
we're still mates now. We still do gigs together and all this sort of stuff. And so having him on board in the Loonies for a bit was an absolute joy, but I'd do it again.
Sure.
Another one who
could be those from other genres as well. I don't know.
Yes,
some crazy new mashup.
I think. Well, with that in mind, it's not exactly a different genre, but it sort of is. I would have loved the thought of being in a band with Vivian Stanshall of the Bonzo Dog Doodah band. He has been a massive hero of mine for years. I wish I'd met him, because having learned about him through documentaries, books, footage, all this sort of stuff, I've realised that sort of spookily, I've done things in the past band-wise, and I sort of think, oh my God, he did that sort of thing as well.
Interesting.
And I never knew that. It's like kind of a discovering a bit of a kindred spirit type thing, but
Very
too
cool.
late because they're gone. So he would definitely be somebody who I'd love that experience with. I think he would have been a great laugh and a great joy to have performed with. And the other one, I have to go back to him, and he's in the punk realms again. Actually, he's Charlie Harper from the UK Subs, again massively influential. One of the first bands I ever put on. I remember at the time thinking he was. I was about 19, and he must have been in his mid-40s, and I remember thinking, you're so old and you're still doing it. This is absolutely amazing. Because in those days, there wasn't that kind of massive broad spectrum of ages so much. So for someone to be in the mid-40s still playing punk gigs...
Like a mature student, wasn't it?
Yeah. This was like, wow. And the guy's now like, how old is he now? He's now 80, and he's still playing.
Just goes to show. He's aged disgracefully.
Absolutely. And I mean, that is just fantastic. So for no other reason than I find the guy an absolute joy. It's people that have influenced me, and those people have been a massive influence on me. And I just sort of think, wow, that would be an absolute joy. But in the main, I've been lucky, because most of the people who I've been in bands with have been a delight.
Sure.
Which is why I've stuck at it, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Really. And they've sort of, they've humoured me enough for me to want to continue.
He's doing his thing, it's fine. Just hide the cutlery or something. And the crockery. We're going to replace all that shit again. Well, great, Chris. Thanks for talking, man.
Thank you, Sam. That's been an absolute delight. I've loved it. Oh, no,
great.
That's been brilliant.
Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment, share, all that good business. And stay tuned for more fantastic interviews with brilliant guests. There's a seat waiting for you.